Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Depeche Mode Global Fan Group Drink and Chat. I'm Rob Rom, my special co-host, the lovely Atusa Tavalai, and a special guest co-host, Vaughn George from over in England. And then we have our special guest today, who's Kevin Paul, the former head engineer at Mute Records, the man behind the 5.1 surround sound mixes of the Depeche Mode catalog. Kevin also hosts a great podcast titled Mixbus, which you definitely need to check out. And his resume of artists that he's worked with is amazing. You can check out his website at kevin-paul.com to see the extent of his resume. Currently, he's been working with Vaughn George on his first two singles, Sleeping Dogs and Bottle, from his upcoming Dark Society album. So welcome, Kevin.
Hi, how you doing, Rob?
Great. Great to have you. Thank you for joining us.
No problem. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here. Hello to everyone.
Hi everybody. So if you haven't been here before, or if you have, a reminder that every time we do one of these drinking chats, our special guest gets to choose a word that whenever the word comes up, we all have a drink. So Kevin, what will be the word of this drinking chat?
The word today will be surround.
I'll drink to that.
Surround, yes.
There you go.
You're trying to get us hammered now.
Oh, 100%.
Mike, it was going to be the. T-H-E. The.
Surround is the word.
Thank you for that.
Now, I know not everybody has necessarily heard the surround sound mixes, but once you get a chance to actually listen, it's just a totally different, it's basically like watching a 3D movie, you know, and to that point, Kevin, some 3D movies have, you know, like a random thing popping out here and there. And then some have, you know, like the full thing is just like immersive in 3D. And it seems that the catalog can almost be somewhat like that as well, where there's certain songs that the entire song is very immersive in 3D, but then there's others where, you know, there's just more elements. And obviously it must be what you found suited each track. Is that what you would say happened, or?
Yeah, I think the Depeche Mode for me are probably the perfect band to mix records in surround, really. Their music is obviously very suited to the concept of space and atmosphere, and surround for me creates a really good platform to have depth and the width that you kind of seek from stereo, really. The task itself, the initial brief of the whole project was, we want to reconstruct all of the albums to make them sound as if they were made in surround at the time of recording. It wasn't we weren't there to reinterpret the records. We were there to reconstruct them. And that obviously presented a huge amount of challenges, huge amount.
So at the time when you did this, was surround sound, you know, coming up in like a newer technology? Did you have like plugins that could actually put things in like 4 channels, or did you have to work with stereo plugins and try to manipulate them into multiple channels? And
no, there was a few plugins being made for surround, and the concept of 5.1 certainly for films had already been really established. So there were plenty of plugins technology wise that were built and designed for surround. Like you had plenty of surround reverbs, surround compressors, surround limiters, and there were a few companies doing some really creative effects for the 5.1 environment. So, but at the time, the projects, and if you've seen and heard the masters, they were made on Super Audio CD, which at the time was a new format developed by Sony Records, because music was really looking to establish itself in a very different way to the public. I think it was trying to reinvent itself. I think one of the problems that they faced was trying to convince people that music sounded better in surround than it did in stereo. But I like to think that when you hear a record that's made in stereo and then you hear the equivalent version in surround, pretty much if it's a fresh production, i.e. there's no kind of nothing to sort of relate to, I think pretty much most people really liked the 5.1 versions better, in terms of a straight, judging it on that particular album or song's merits. And you can see today with Dolby Atmos and spatial audio that the music industry has continued to try to find a way to create 3D sound. And I think with things like binaural and format being more established in video games and within the movie industry, it's been established for, at least 10, maybe 15 years now. I think finally people are finding ways to sell the product. I think one of the initial problems is that you had to have 6 speakers in your house, you had to have a DVD, but obviously everything's now digital, everything's now streamed. So in terms of the consumer, it's much easier for them to get hold of the product of a surround mix, whether that's 5.1 or Dolby Atmos. And I think in the next few years we're going to see a real change into really going into a spatial audio, surround audio, if you like, concept. If you look at the change from mono to stereo, that took like 10 to 15 years for it to be really established, and I think you'll see the same again for stereo to surround or spatial audio.
He said surround twice.
He said surround a couple times there, yeah. So.
I'm counting.
So, do you actually listen to surround in your home, and do you listen to the works that you've done? Like, have you re-listened to any of the Depeche Mode stuff lately? Or
well, I not only listen to it in my home, I actually teach at university mixing in surround to master students every year. So every year we go through the choice picks from the Depeche Mode back catalogue, and we also use some other people like Nick Cave or Moby or other artists like that. So every year I'm constantly listening to the work that I've done, but also now with the spatial audio stuff, I'll be bringing that into the lectures as well. So I mean, personally, I think the format's really good. Actually, I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I mentioned to Vaughn George that after I've been revisiting these surround versions, that I'm wondering why did I even rebother buying the vinyl again? But
well, I mean, the vinyl's great. I mean, the vinyl sounds amazing.
It does, but
that's a different kind of thing, isn't it? The listening to the stereo on vinyl. I mean, I've been buying loads of records lately for the vinyl experience.
It's certainly the listening experience is drastically different. But I mean, of course, you have the artwork on the vinyl, and but as far as my system at home, it sounds so much superior in the surround, obviously. But the vinyl is nice when you can get those things that you can't normally get. Which that actually leads to another question. On the remasters, some of the songs you have like bonus material that is in 5.1, but then other albums have nothing. They're just the album. Any idea what was behind that? Or
yeah, I think that's just strictly to do with content that was available. I know the person responsible for putting together the creative aspects of it, Roland Brown. He did a fantastic job in going through all of the archives that were available, just trying to piece together a product. I mean, if I'm sure your listeners know, if you know about Mute, when they want to do something, they try to do it really, really well, and particularly with their content. Mute as a record label never liked just to put a record out. They always had to have something to go with the record and a reason for you to buy it and for you to want to own it. And whether that was bonus material or the quality of the product, there was always something that they wanted to draw from it. And on those remasters, if you look at what you actually get per package, you've got a stereo remaster of the original record. You have the making of the film. You have, you know, how the album was made. You would have a super audio CD version, which would contain the stereo, the surround version. On the DVD, you would have the stereo version again. You'd have a Dolby version, a DTS version. So, and the package itself, you know, the quality of that package at the time is unparalleled. You know, for me, it's just totally original. It's one of the best. And that's what Mute wanted to, when they released the series. They didn't just want to release the records. They wanted to give the fans something to say, I want to own this because it has something different. And on some occasions, we had lots of material. On other occasions, we had less, really.
So on all of these remasters, then the CD that's actually in there is SACD or
There's a SACD version and a CD version. When you put it in, the format of the CD dictates whether it's playing on a SACD or a CD player.
Okay.
And actually you can switch over to both formats. It's very clever.
I definitely have the CD version, but and that something I wanted to ask as well, because you mentioned about SACD earlier. Someone had asked me if I had compared the SACD versions to the surround versions, which I have not. But what would you have you done that, or would you? How would you compare them?
The SACD version contains the surround version on it. Super Audio CD was a multi-channel format. I think the comparison to be made was Super Audio CD versus the DTS data stream on the DVD or the Dolby data stream on the DVD. And in terms of sound quality, the SACD is full band 96K uncompressed audio. Whereas on the Dolby A, you obviously have the Dolby compression. The DTS stream is full band 96K, and on the DVD has a 48K version as well. So there's plenty of formats depending on what kind of system you're playing it on. For me, the DTS version would be probably the one that most people would have a DVD player that would access the DTS stream. And that for me is actually a very good sounding version of the record. It's probably, you know, as good as it can get, unless you've got a Super Audio CD player. I was really lucky to hear. We went down to the DTS offices just outside London. We sat in their private cinema and listened to Violator on their huge cinema, and it sounded pretty good.
Oh wow, I bet.
and the guy who invited us said it's the best surround album he's ever heard.
That's awesome. Yeah, that is a very great version that you've done there.
Yeah.
It looks like we have a question. I'm going to bring on a guest right now because it looks like we have a hand raised. I don't want to make her wait too long, so we're going to bring her on right now. You have to unmute yourself, and we're going to spotlight you if you want to ask your question, Dalita. Welcome.
Good evening.
Hello.
Nice. CD there.
Okay, that's the singles, right?
96 to 88. 98.
Yeah, 86 to 98. Yeah.
I went to library yesterday. You understand?
You just tour of the universe. Yeah.
Now, so that's a good question too. There are some live 5.1 remixes. Did you do those as well, Kevin?
Let me think. I did the devotional tour one. I did the Tour of the Universe one. I think I would have done that one. It would say on it, I think, on the credit. But I'm
Okay.
pretty sure I did the Tour of the Universe one, because they were all kind of done around the same time as the surround versions. Right at the end of it, we had released, or the band had released, Sounds of the Universe, and we did those. We did those at the same time.
Great. Delita, did you have any other question, or is that you just want to kind of chime in? All right.
Thanks. Thanks.
Showing
Alright,
us what
thanks.
she's bought. Thank you.
All right. So Tammy, we're going to bring you on.
Oh, hey guys, thanks. So my question may seem a little obvious, but I'm wondering how the original mastering and mix affects the outcome of what you do. Because I mean, I'm thinking, unfortunately, I don't have these on 5.1, but I'm thinking of something like Violator, which is already just even, you know, as a teenager listening on my crummy headphones to the tape, you could just hear the dynamic, how dynamic it was. And construction time, again, similarly on vinyl, it just already pops with all the sound. So how does that original mastering and mixing of the album have an impact on what you do in the 5.1 and other
I think when we did the early records, if you try to think about the evolution of the band when they first started, the records maybe weren't as complex as some of the other records. Certainly weren't as complex as Violator or Songs of Faith and Devotion. I mean, that was peak Depeche Mode kind of production intensity, if you like. And one of the challenges when doing kind of both kind of extremes is that the early records maybe didn't have a lot of elements to them. So, you know, Speak and Spell was recorded on a 16-track tape recorder. So there would have been no more than 15, maybe 16, maybe 18 sounds. And that was it. So the job there was to create space in the surround for the whole of the record. It wasn't to try and reinvent the records. It was to try to make the surround versions as faithful as possible to the stereo versions. When we got to records like, I would say from Music for the Masses onwards, Depeche Mode as a band started really analyzing and producing their records in a very different way for me. And what that allowed us to do in the surround versions was really draw out and hopefully demonstrate to the listener the depth of the elements that were in the records, and it allowed us to be a lot more creative. But we always referred to the original versions to make sure that we were never straying away from the intent of the records, you know. And I'm not quite sure if I can describe what I mean by the intent. I think, you know, the mood of the songs, regardless of whether it was stereo or surround, we always tried to keep them the same, you know.
Along those lines, one thing I found interesting, and I think Mike LaJoy in Seattle also noticed this, it sounded like there's a phaser effect on the lead of Just Can't Get Enough in, you know, I'm not sure. I don't recall that on the original recording. So was that something that I just missed on the original recording, or you brought it up more prominently in the?
Yeah, quite possibly you missed it, or we brought it out. I mean, you know, the elements that are there are.
We wouldn't have added it.
No, we wouldn't. Well, what we had to do, I mean, for me as an engineer, if you can imagine, I was basically reconstructing everything. So the first thing I had to do was deconstruct the stereo versions. I had to listen to them and go, okay, you know, these are not only did you have to listen to the whole record, but you had to say, okay, this is how the drums are supposed to sound. How would they have made those drums sound that way at that time? And a lot of the time, what that meant is push away most of the technology that you have today and just work with the technology that they would have had back in 1980, you know? And from that point, then you could start to place yourself in the studio in 1980 with the band. And then you could think, okay, well, what kind of reverb is being used on the voice? What kind of reverb is being used on the drums? Are the drums loud or are they quiet? Is the bass line dominating the track, or does it sit right back? Because if you were going to mix those songs from scratch today and you didn't have any reference, they would sound completely different. And the idea of the project, like I said before, was not to make them sound different. The idea of the project was, hopefully, you as a listener would go, that sounds like the original version, but in surround. It doesn't sound different. And that was really, really important. And I think we did that pretty well, considering. I think we
Absolutely.
managed to get the intent there pretty well.
Definitely, you did a great job. And
So the difference, the way I'm understanding it, is it would almost be like if you're listening to a stereo mix and you hit the mono button, it goes to mono.
Yeah,
it's the same. So essentially, it's like hitting the mono button on a stereo mix. You wanted it to be exactly the same with nothing added.
Yeah, exactly.
But that must have been very difficult to do because, as I said this last time, Rob, the problem is you're dealing with Depeche Mode, which is not a band, it's an institution. And you've got this cult-like following. And Kevin's going to mention one of the complaints he got, despite Violator being one of his greatest surround sound achievements. I'll let you tell the story of the complaint. But you're almost like, I don't want to say messing with, but it's almost like brain surgery. You're going in with, these things are wired to people's psyche. And I would just be too nervous to do it. So,
well, we were highly aware of that. We were highly aware from the very beginning that these versions would be scrutinized to the nth degree.
They were
highly. I mean, I like literally, we made a very conscious effort to make sure that there would be as little comment or critique as possible. We wanted people, as I've said a couple of times already, to go, wow, that sounds like the same version, like it was done at the same time in the room with the band there. And obviously, one of the ways that we did that was that we had the producer for every album come into the studio and run their ears over it and go, okay, we think that we've got it kind of where it should be. And then obviously Daniel Miller came in for the first couple of records. Then Gareth Jones would have come in for a couple of records. And then we had Flood. Then we had Dave Bascom. Then we had, who else would we got? We had Alan. Alan came in and
fanboy alert.
I was gonna get your fanboy siren there.
And, he came down to have a listen. And some of the producers were really hard to get hold of. I mean, incredibly hard. They'd moved on. They were doing other things. They might have been on the other side of the world, but we always waited and Mute again. They never rushed the project. They didn't say, okay, it's got to be out by this time. We released them, I think, in blocks of 3, maybe 4. And that was deliberately designed. And I think you notice, if memory serves me correctly, the last block was the ones that were the hardest. So it was Violator, Songs of Faith and Devotion. I can't remember what Exciter would have come after that, maybe, or Ultra. Ultra would have come after that one. Yeah. So we released that at the very end because they were the hardest to do, and Mute always gave us the time. Daniel, if you know anything about Daniel at the label, he never ever says, okay, the project has to go out now. It's when the artist is ready. And thankfully we had that time. I mean, the whole project took over 12 months to do, if not maybe like 18 months to do from start to finish.
Could I ask how often was it the case that you had to have things re-recorded, if you had to at all?
We didn't have to re-record many things. There was, I think on the Ultra album for sure, we had to re-record 2 parts, maybe 3 parts on the record. I can't tell you which songs, I just don't remember. But basically, we couldn't find them on the multi-track. They were evident in the stereo version. We were all scratching our heads going, well, look, there's a sound missing there. There's something not right. What is it? And Tim Simeon came down and Kerry Hopwood came down, and they both run their ears over them separately and said, no, that there's a sound missing here. And we got Dave Clayton, I think is the keyboard engineer, who played the keyboard on the original record. And we managed to get hold of him. He said, oh, yeah, on that song, yeah, we used the synthesizer, whatever. We said, look, you don't think you could come down, do you, and like play the part again? He said, yeah, no problem. And literally he came down to the studio, set up the synthesizer. He still had the preset that he used on the record on the synthesizer. He literally booted it up within 10, 15 minutes. He just went, and it was done. And it was brilliant, you know, those kind. And Alan had to do a couple of those things with us because we didn't have a few of the samples from Faith and Devotion, and we had to ask Alan to come down, and he brought boxes of DAT tapes, DAT tapes, which, for those that aren't aware, were small digital tapes that in the 90s and 2000s effectively were how we were storing all the digital masters. And at the end of a session, you would sample off onto these tapes for archive purposes all of the samples that you used in case you had to use them again for the live versions or for remixes or for whatever. And Alan had to come down a few times and go through all the tapes, and he found all the stuff that we had, you know, and I don't think there was anything that we couldn't ever get. At some point, someone somewhere had the thing that we needed. And yeah, we were pretty lucky like that. I mean, you know, we're fairly fastidious at Mute to make sure that we have what you need. I mean, you know, apart from the fact that that's our job, is to make sure you do have that stuff. But it's surprising 15 years later how you still have it all together, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure if you couldn't find one of the tracks, especially for us, like Vaughn George said, how we're very much an institution. If one sound might be missing, everything sounds off to us. Might sound like a sort of a remix in a way.
Well, it sounds the same to us. I mean, you know, it's no different for us. We're listening to it going, that's not right. What's wrong there? And you know, you scratch your head for a little bit, but eventually you work out what it is. And then the process, the hard part then is trying to work out how to fix it. So we go back to our archive and we see if it's in the archive, or is it on another version, or have we got the right version of the song, you know? And then we establish that we've got everything that we can. Okay, like I say, we literally had a little bit on Faith and Devotion and 1 or 2 songs on Ultra that we had to do. Apart from that, everything was there.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing, actually. Pretty amazing.
Question from Mike in Seattle. Hey, Mike.
Hey, maybe less of a question than just kind of an observation comment as I've been going through, like Rob, you know, going through and re-listening to these.
It gets brutal in you.
One thing and don't take this as a critique. It's literally just one of those things that's like, I wonder, you know, and so anyway, I found it fascinating that more of the album tracks that were not my favorite are actually more my favorite on the surround.
Okay.
And I think part of that is due to, and I would love to hear any insight on this. It seems like the songs that were singles were, oh, look what Vaughn found. It seems like the singles for the albums were done with a little less like quote unquote experimenting, like things ping ponging around, or panned really far, front, back, left, or right. And then songs like Pipeline or Shouldn't Have Done That, or what was another one I wrote down? Waiting for the Night to Fall. There were ones that those are just kind of have stuff bouncing all over the place, and maybe it's just a personal preference of mine, but I enjoy those a lot more because it's still the same thing, but it's very different than the stereo, if that makes sense.
You can't hear it on the stereo. That's why the surround is so good. It brings out all those.
Right.
Yeah. I think there's probably an element of that. I think also, certainly with a song like Waiting for the Night to Fall, in the surround you have a lot more space to play with.
Mm-hmm.
And Waiting for the Night is a really dense song.
For sure.
If you listen to the stereo, there's a lot of information in the stereo.
Mm-hmm.
And possibly what happens is when you move it into the surround, you have the ability to separate everything a little bit more. And we don't necessarily want to separate it so it doesn't sound cohesive, because that's not the intention.
Right.
But I think particularly for Waiting for the Night to Fall, and I remember mixing this one, and actually is one of the hardest ones to mix, is if you listen to the lyrics at the end of every line or 2 or 3 lines,
right,
there's a different effect on every single line. Now, as a mixing engineer, that was really difficult to read.
It's a nightmare.
Right? Because I would be listening to the song thinking, oh yeah, I've got that one. Yeah, that one's there. That one's done. That one's done. What's that? And all of a sudden you'd go, oh, bloody hell, there's something different there. And it's not something that I'd had set up in the computer. It's something that I had then had to recreate. But you'd have to listen so intently. And every time you listen to it, you'd hear another layer. And I think there's a part of that actually, that in the surround, it opens out the space a little bit more. And even something like Shouldn't Have Done That, that again is quite a slow song, right?
Yeah.
I think the slower tracks have that space that you can't hear in the stereo.
Interesting. Yeah, that
when the tempo is slow. You have
the Pipeline is slow. Yeah, you're right. That's an
even
interesting.
Like Condemnation, and sometimes those exactly perfect examples.
Absolutely. One Caress or
Judas. Even Judas sounded great. Like,
and I think the slower the songs, the more you hear in terms of the space.
Right.
When you're hearing like Violator, Personal Jesus, Behind the Wheel, any of the up-tempo songs, there's not much room there. You've got to make them that tight sound, because that's the record. You can't get away from that too much.
Right. You can't screw around with ping-ponging things around, because it's going to take you out of it. Yeah.
Although Personal Jesus, if you listen to that, that's ping-ponging all over the place.
Right.
But that song is almost the perfect 5.1 song. Like, almost. Like, I don't think you...
Right. Totally. One other quick thing that, and this is sort of getting really into the geek talk here, but I think it's interesting to kind of articulate, is that when you were talking about going from mono to stereo, when you think about how speakers work, they're vibrating and sending waves out to your ears that are then picking those up. And when you only have 2 cones or 2 cones in a tweeter or whatever coming at you, that's creating different sound waves than it would when you have 5 speakers around you and a sub. And so you get that. I think that could be one of the reasons why so many sounds, like Rob mentioned, sound different, is because you're getting a more isolated waveform than you would.
In the surround sphere, you have a lot more dynamic range in the speaker. So we've got 5 speakers that are all full range. So when I have maybe some placement of the backing vocals or some synthesizers or whatever, they're full range sounds. I don't need to EQ them to compete with the sounds that are at the front. Whereas in the stereo versions, you're having to maybe get rid of some of the bottom end. Or you're having to EQ out some of the mid range to get the sound to fit within the stereo version.
Right.
We didn't have to do that. And that's I think that's one of the advantages, actually. I think it's one of the advantages of surround in general, that you have a lot more space to fit the instruments in. You know.
Yeah.
There's a few, I think if you listen to the albums in general, there were a few kind of like consistencies. Like I tried to put backing vocals in the back speakers most of the time, not necessarily all the time, but I tried to put them back in the back speakers. Also, I try to see the setup of the speakers as not 5 surround speakers, but I try to see almost like a quad system. So it's actually 4 speakers. And I use the center speaker as like an effects speaker. So if you listen to the mixes, there's not much actually happening in the center speaker.
Right. Yeah, I noticed
What's
that.
happening draws your attention to the front of the stereo image, the front of the mixes, to allow you to concentrate your efforts on the front and not be distracted too much by the surround.
But that's more natural, though.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's less distracting.
Because we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. I'm not trying to get you to look around constantly going, oh, what's that? Because that's not comfortable for anyone.
Yeah.
And these weren't gimmicks. You know, we weren't creating something that makes people go, oh, this is really good, isn't it? And it wasn't that. These are very serious things.
Right.
You know, and not just for the Depeche Mode, any of the surround stuff that I've done.
Yeah, totally. Like when Rob compared it to a 3D movie versus a 2D movie, the best 3D movies are the ones that you forget you're watching a 3D movie.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The technology doesn't, the gimmicks don't get in the way.
Exactly.
You're immersed in the experience of it rather than it being a gimmick. Yeah.
There's some records that Depeche Mode make that allow you to be not necessarily gimmicky, but allow you to move sounds around.
Experimental.
For instance, on Playing the Angel, you've got I Want It All. And at the end of I Want It All, there's like about a 3 or 4 minute section of instrumental music. And that has loads of sounds that you can move around a lot. Because for me, you always have to listen to the song. And I think maybe Atusa was asking this earlier as well, or Tammy, I think it was asking about how you're approaching them, and generally you kind of let the song guide you as to how creative or how crazy you can be. Some of the songs don't want crazy because they're not crazy songs. They might be intimate love songs, or they might be intimate songs or slow songs, and you don't have the room to go, let me spin this sound round and round.
Right.
Because most people are going to listen to it and go, well, that has no context. That's not what this song is about. Whereas Personal Jesus, it's just a song that literally goes bing, 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 for the whole 7 minutes, 8 minutes.
Right.
Which allows me to be a little bit more creative.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I thought like Sometimes is a great example of what you were talking about on Black Celebration, where it's a very minimal, intimate song. It's a piano and vocals, but there's so much echo vocal stuff going on that you can keep the primary vocal kind of in the center front, and then have the other like echoes and things kind of bouncing around, which I thought was really that one was a really good one on that. Actually, almost everyone on Black Celebration, I couldn't find anything that I was like, eh.
Great record.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm not doing nothing super special. The music's doing all the work. My job is literally to make sure it sounds like it did. Above and beyond that, the music takes over, you know?
One of the more interesting things about that is because they are separated more, like on Black Celebration, the initial low bass sound has a weird filtering on it but it's in the original record, but it's kind of buried. So now because it's more separated,
Yeah.
you hear it come out more, and it's actually kind of better that that bass sound is buried at the beginning, because it does have kind of a weird filtering, which it's one of those weird effects of the surround sound system. But Lloyd, we have a question from Lloyd.
I mean, once again, it's because your brain is so used to the stereo mix, and with it's almost like, you imagine, the way I see it is, it's like you've been listening in mono all the time, and then someone brings you a stereo mix. You're like, hell. So it's the same when you go from stereo to surround. It's like you've been listening in stereo, now you're just hearing it in a different dimension. So it's, the brain takes some adjustment, because how many times have we heard these songs?
Oh no, for sure. And it's absolutely, the good thing is I'm very open to hearing it. And I absolutely appreciate, it's almost like ear candy, basically, when you hear it in the full surround. But certain songs, it's because you're not used to hearing like the reveal. But sometimes you hear the reveal and you're like, wow, that's cool. I never noticed that part. Like that was buried in there.
I think also one of the things that we did is, at some point when we were doing the surround versions, we might have listened to that bass sound and gone, yeah, but that bass sound doesn't sound exactly like that. But then we had to say to ourselves, yeah, but was it originally good? Was that right? Could we have made that slightly a little bit better? So at some point we had to have the surround versions as their own thing, that they had to stand up on their own. So there would be slight differences. I mean, it's not 100% true, because it wasn't done at the time. But the feeling and the mood was far more important to capture than the idiosyncrasies.
Right.
That maybe become, those things become personal choices rather than right or wrong. Yeah. You know, does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Like when we're mixing a record.
Exactly. I mean, if Rob, if I mix a record, you mix a record, Mike mixes a record, and Gareth, and let's say we're all going to interpret it differently, because when you hire a mix engineer, you hire them for their aesthetic, and each engineer will decide which is the focal point and interpret it in a different way. So I think it is just listening to what does the music want, as opposed to what I want to present here.
Right.
And I think also, if let's imagine there's, how many people are in this room listening to this conversation?
24.
Okay, so let's say that's a lot of people. Let's say 4 of us are mixing a record. At some point, we're going to have a difference of opinion about a particular thing.
Yeah.
Now, none of those opinions are wrong. They're just different opinions. And at some point with the surround versions, we had to make a judgment call, effectively, to go, well, okay, that's how it was. This is how it is. Which one did we think was better? Or which one did we prefer, actually? And the producer might have gone, well, I kind of preferred how it was, so let's try and get it back to what there. The producer might have gone, yeah, but do you know what? I actually quite like it how it is now. Let's leave it. Yeah. And bring a little bit to the party, But that only happened occasionally. That really only happened occasionally.
It's
Lloyd,
also,
do you have a question?
sorry, go, Tisa, go.
Lloyd, ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah. Hi, Kevin. Hi, Paul. So, hi, Paul. Nice to finally talk to you. I think I spoke to you briefly by email once to get interviewed by Vaughn.
To me, he's my scout.
Is he?
Yeah, he got you on. So
okay, well that's because he's from the Matrix. Isn't
he's from the Matrix. Yeah.
He knows everyone.
He does. Yeah, he's connected.
Hey, so anyway, Paul. It's not really a technical question, but it's to do with a person you worked on the Violator 5.1 surround sound. I think there's a master engineer called Simon Hayworth.
Yes, Simon, good friend of mine.
Yeah, so obviously, he's a great producer. He's done Tubular Bells with Mike Oakfield. But I wanted to know, how did that working relationship come about, and how crucial was he with the mastering of that record?
That relationship came about through the 5.1 projects. prior to the Depeche Mode project, we had done Goldfrapp. We had done possibly Moby. And essentially, we were looking for a mastering engineer. And Simon lives like 400 miles away. He lives way down in Devon. He's not based in London. So he wasn't the most easiest person to access. But we felt that what Simon did was what the project needed. And if you go down to his studio, it's a lovely studio. It's a really beautiful room. And Simon had a lot of experience in making masters in surround mastering from old back catalogues, which at the time not a lot of people had experience of. And we just wanted to make sure, again, with the quality control of the records, to make sure that there was that consistency. Simon did the remastering as well with the stereos. I think. I'm pretty sure he did them. So we just wanted that. I'm not sure who found the connection. I assume it's Roland at Mute who was in charge of the project as a whole. And that working relationship just worked incredibly well. I mean, he's such a great guy. He's a really intense listener. He listens to the music, which I'm sure all mastering engineers do. But there was just an affinity that we had in terms of what we were trying to achieve from the project. And that's why we chose him. That's why he got on board, and that was it, really. You know, nothing more than that, really.
Oh yeah, no, thank you for answering my question, Kev. I actually spoke to the guy brief by email, because again I was trying to approach him for an interview with Vaughn, but he politely declined because he said he couldn't remember a thing about the project. So
yeah, I mean, he's done a lot. Simon's done a lot of really great records, you know, and I mean, he's such a nice guy in terms of when you go to his lovely, I mean, his studio is amazing. It's just in the middle of the countryside. And you look out the window and you've got cows and sheep walking past the window. It's brilliant, you know. It's such a change of pace from being in London. But he just felt suited for the project, and personally, I think it worked out really well, really.
Thank you for asking my question. It's another quick question. It's not another geeky one. Because as you probably know, with Violator and Devotional, as it got more complex, there was a lot of engineers involved on those records. I was wondering, have you ever worked or come across any of them? Like, for example, Pino Pistola or Steve Lyon, for example.
Pino, we know.
He was in the Milan
Violator.
at the beginning of Violator.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the engineers, no. Flood obviously produced the records. They were obviously made well before I was involved at Mute. But we made a real effort, like I think I've said before, to get the producers involved in the project. The engineers, generally, we didn't have to contact, mainly because in terms of the creative process, obviously when you're making a record, engineers don't necessarily have that much say in the project. Obviously, they're important in terms of the team at the time of the making of the record, but in terms of what we were trying to achieve, we really needed the guy who had the final say, and ultimately that was the producer and or the band. And the band were just like, we're really happy to hand it over to the producers and to Daniel, and that was it. We didn't have the time, unfortunately, to grab everybody we could into the project.
There's an interesting story. Kevin said it on my interview, but I want him to tell the story here as well. Obviously, Flood's a very, very busy man, and tell us this. And I must also mention here, guys, that when he got the sessions to mix, understand this. All the parts, and I'm talking in layman's terms now for people who aren't musicians, all the individual parts were dry. There weren't effects on them, only if it was an integral part of that sound. So the vocals would be dry. And that to me is a nightmare. Just to think you've got this dry vocal, you've now got to listen to it and to sort of reverse engineer a vocal chain. Tell us the story about Personal Jesus, because Kevin said this last time, and I didn't realize this. We've heard Personal Jesus millions of times, but when we think of Personal Jesus, what's the thing we think of? However, it's the vocal effect on Dave's voice, which is actually so important. And I'll let Kevin take over.
Yeah. So basically, obviously, as Vaughn said, you were reverse engineering these projects, and Violator is a massive project. I mean, Violator and Songs of Faith and Devotion are, even by today's standards, huge projects. And today we have unlimited tracks, in a computer. You didn't have unlimited tracks when Violator was made, or Songs of Faith. You had whatever you could get hold of. And even the computers at the time that we were doing these projects, they only had limited tracks. So if there were parts and effects recorded, there was only maybe a few parts recorded. Most of the reverbs, the delay chains, the panning, the equalization, all of that had to be recreated, literally from scratch. So Violator, I think, had well over 100 parts in the song.
Is that including buses, or is that just
instrumental?
No,
that's instrumental tracks.
Jesus.
And parts. So if I was to lay out a piece of paper, you would have 100 different kind of things coming in and out at various different points in the arrangement of the song. Not all 100 at once, but different things all the time. And the vocal effects, I mean, like I say, for a lot of people, it's the guitar or the drums. Which, do people know what that is?
Yeah, that was
aware of what that actually is.
Those drums, it was stomping on flight cases.
That's right,
and it was recorded at different distances. So they stomped on the flight cases, and then they took the flight cases down to a stairwell. Put the microphones at the top of the stairwell. I mean, so it was the Gareth Jones things of recording acoustic spaces and recording the sound of the room.
But those parts were tracked multiple times, so you would have 12 of them, and then they'd condense them down to 2 tracks, and so on. But for me, the main part of the songs, and certainly the part that I knew people would be listening to, is the voice and the vocal effect on Personal Jesus. I couldn't get it. I spent 2 weeks. I spent weeks, if not like a month, trying to get this vocal part, and I tried every effect that I thought it could be. I tried calling people, asking people's opinion. We had engineers would come into the studio, be like, look, have a listen to this. What do you think of this? And you think, okay, it sounds really good, but you'd play the stereo version, you go, nowhere near. And you'd be like, oh my God, this is driving me. I'm not joking. I was going home and dreaming about this vocal effect for weeks, going, I can't get it. And this is like the key track.
Yeah.
There's not many tracks above Personal Jesus that would be in the top 3. And Flood is a notoriously difficult person to get hold of. Notoriously difficult. And I was leaving messages with his manager. I was phoning friends who knew him saying, look, if you see Flood, can you ask him to call me? Or he's working away on a project, and when he's on a project, he doesn't get involved with anything else. And I genuinely started to wonder if we were going to get the track, because we couldn't get the sound of the vocal. And one day the phone rang and it was Flood. And I'm like, Flood, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for weeks. It's like, yeah, sorry, Kev, you know, like, I've just been busy, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, look, I'm really struggling with the vocal effect on Personal Jesus. And he went, Personal Jesus. Yes, that will be a short haul on the SPX 90 with the pre-delay set to 1/16th. And you have a reverb time of whatever it was.
And that's 15 years after he's done.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, mate. And I'm like, what? Is that it? And he's like, yeah, I think that's it. So I said, okay, hold on. We had an SPX 90 in the studio. I set up the parameters to what he said. I press play on the tape. Dave comes through. I turn up the faders, and it was the vocal sound. And I'm like, is that it? I'm generally like, is that what I've been struggling with?
Just that one.
That was it. And it creates like it's almost pseudo reverse sound. If you listen to the record, it's almost like the person of Jesus. Yeah. It's almost like a reverse, but it's not. Yeah. But that's the effect it's created. And I on the one hand was incredibly grateful that he had actually contacted me and I got it. But on the other hand, I was so mad that it was something so simple. I was just like, fucking hell, excuse my language, but is that it? Is that what I've been struggling for the last
small whole reverb? Yeah, just a reverb, yeah.
I'm never going to forget it. Like, never, ever going to forget it.
Because you probably had like a stack of
vocals. I was trying reverbs, long hauls, plates, reverse reverbs, concert halls, this reverb, that reverb, getting like plugins, like buying plugins, and like nothing. Things sounded good, but it didn't sound like that.
Yeah, and everyone knows what it will sound like, even if they're not a musician.
Absolutely. And like you'd set it up and you think, oh yeah, this is really good. This is sounding good. Let me just compare it to the step. Oh no, it sounds nothing like it. Yeah, that was.
And you know what they say, or we know what you say. Reverb equals
girls.
Yeah.
Reverb equals girls.
Well done, Atusa. Yeah.
I'm getting all of us that t-shirt.
Nice.
I'm surprised, Atusa. Did you watch one of my videos recently?
I watch all your videos.
Oh, bless you. I'll send you that tenner later. Tell them the story.
So for those that don't know where that equation comes from, it's a well-known mathematical equation. That came from, if you listen to a lot of the early Depeche Mode, there's a lot of reverb on the records. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And the thinking behind that is that the band, obviously, you know, they wanted the rock and roll lifestyle, and they thought, well, if we put lots of reverb on things, we'll get a lot of girls.
And of course, Violator's very dry. Violator's very dry.
And they were really worried about working with Flood
because he's very dry.
Because his productions are really dry.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, but you don't understand, like, you know, we need lots of reverb. And Flood's like, what are you talking about? Why do you need lots of reverb? They were like, because reverb equals girls.
But how did they in their mind,
reverb makes things sound expensive and luxurious. You know, big. Everything sounds big and like, you know, expensive. And like, when it sounds expensive, girls are attracted to that.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was their thinking. You know, it's a long time ago. You know, these are guys from Essex, a small town like in London. So they were like, reverb equals girls.
That's hilarious. I don't know. That's bizarre.
I still think it would make a great T-shirt. I really.
I'm making all of us that T-shirt. I'd love to wear that.
That'd be great.
We actually have two guys from really, really successful Depeche Mode cover bands, Gabrielle and Brent Meyer. They're in these Depeche Mode cover bands, and they're brilliant. So you guys remember, reverb equals girls.
Reverb equals girls. That's the equation of life.
So, Kevin,
go ahead, guys.
Speaking about vocals, one of the things that I really wanted to ask about, in a lot of the, you know, in some of the songs, the lead vocal is front and center, but then there's others where there's like a double of the lead vocal in the surround. Yep. So is that only on tracks where you had like a double vocal available, or did every single track have double vocals available? Not talking about harmonies, but just the lead vocal itself, because it sounds very powerful when you have it in both speakers. Obviously, it's not necessarily as dynamic when you have like the lead in the front and the harmonies in the back only, but it seems to boost everything, and it's kind of different because there are takes that are like, okay, the one lead vocal is just strictly there in the front. What's the
well, I think that's potentially to do with the space thing. I think if you listen to the stereo, that double track is there, and it might not be a double track, it might be a pre-delay on the reverb or a very short delay. So it's not actually two voices. What it is one voice with a very small delay on the voice. And in order to give the vocal the strength in the surround versions, part of the idea is to put some of that in the rear speakers as well, to have Dave be the main focus point of the songs, you know.
Yeah, it actually did sound like there was 3 different kind of takes. So there was some where the main lead vocal was only center, then there was some where the lead vocal is center, and then you had like the reflections coming off, whether it's delay or reverb or whatever in the surround. And then it seemed like there was others where there was like a completely doubled track that was in this.
That's quite possibly that will be another version of the double track.
Okay.
Of the voice. That will be a separate voice. That I don't know, you have to talk about maybe a specific song for me to recall the specifics behind it. But
let me see if I look one up here, because let's see. I took notes on all these different songs, so but it is interesting because, as we've talked about, the simpler songs and the slower songs are the ones that are more dynamic in the surround.
Well, the slower ones you're going to hear more.
Yeah.
Just by the very definition, there's more space for you to hear them.
So like Stories of Old, there's a doubled vox in the center and in the surround, it sounds like.
Okay. That's probably because there's a double version on the record itself.
Okay.
I'd have to hear it.
So some of them probably only have a single lead.
Yeah, some of them do. Yeah, some of them do. Personal Jesus being one of them.
Right. And that was certainly one that had just the center vocal.
Single track vocal.
Okay, yeah.
And if you listen to the record, it doesn't sound like that because of the effect. And this is where it drives me crazy, because I'm searching for that effect, going, well, everything I do doesn't sound like that. What is it? Oh, bloody hell, it's short haul. Thanks very much. Why didn't someone write it down? Or record it on the tape.
Enjoy. I'm just digressing a bit here. Enjoy the silence as well. I got hold of the multi-tracks. That's basically also just a one vocal track. And a lot of people don't know this yet, because I'm going to do a video on this on my album review series when we get to Violator. When I got the multi-tracks, Alan Wilder fanboy alert. When it gets to the chorus, you hear Martin going, "Here in my arms." But you've actually got Alan doing that as well. Here in my arms. Yeah. He's actually doing it as well. Now, you don't hear it, but it's just like another layer to beef it up. And we miss Alan.
Yes, we do.
Listen to the silence here.
And, that's one thing, too, though, on the multi-tracks, on the early stuff, you can hear some of the harmonies that are not necessarily Martin, which I'm not accustomed to hearing. So that's pretty interesting.
Especially on the Mercy in You, and I'm thinking of Songs of Faith and Devotion. I didn't realize this as well, and I'm supposed to have musical ears, but on the surround versions you get this stumble in my footsteps, keep the same appointments I kept. Now what you hear on the record is, you stumble in my footsteps.
There's a really high one.
You hear that, but then you've got
Martin.
You've actually got Dave screaming, "You stumble!" Like really, like an octave higher, a lot higher.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, really high one.
But he's actually singing in Martin's register, but he's actually screaming it. It's not a head voice. So, and you hear that on the surround version. It's amazing. Yeah. And on the stereo version, you don't consciously hear it, but it gives it that it just gives it that edge.
Yeah, well, see, like I said, at those points, there's a choice. Do we remove those little nuggets of gold and go, oh, actually, you can't quite hear that on the stereo, but it is there. Because if you take it away, you notice it's not there. Or do we kind of just leave it where it is, so it gives the listener just that little bit of kind of depth.
It gives it a color.
Yeah, a little bit of color, a little bit more than what it could be.
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of that's to do with, we're looking at them 15 years later. Yeah, we're looking at them knowing that people have better quality surround sound systems in their environments, and things like that. You know.
I've got a sort of a related follow-up with respect to some layered sounds.
Who have we got here?
Let me bring you on here. Hold on 1 second. Let me bring you on. Oh, did you try to add him at the same time?
Oh, is that Brent? He's up here.
There we go.
There he is.
Hey, Brent.
Hi, Brent. Hello, mate.
Hi there. So yeah, my question, Alan was notorious for, in particular, snares and bass lines would be a composite of 2 to 3 sounds. Interestingly, both of those tend to be straight up the middle or, mid-side painting arrangements. Were any of those ever split off into their component parts for surround?
Yes.
Cool.
Well, no. What we would have to do is to recreate that balance. We had separate access to them. You know, we'd have 3 different versions if there were 3 parts to the bass. And we would have to recreate that balance. That was our role, and sometimes that was easy, sometimes it wasn't easy, and the same with the drums. The drums, like particularly for a song like I Feel You, there's a lot of drums in that song, right? That you might not maybe hear in the stereo or hear as in the master, but on the multi-track, there's lots of parts playing the drums. There's like a drum kit, there's an ambient drum kit, there's individual hits, there's 3 or 4 snares. So the combinations of all of those tracks, I mean, there's thousands of combinations. We had to listen constantly and go, oh, is that it? Is that, no, that's not it. Okay, maybe a little, and some of it was easy. Some of it was really hard. I Feel You was a hard song to mix. That was probably the second hardest song to mix after Personal.
Why is it? Is it that bass?
Just because, the drums, just getting the drums right. Getting the feel. So when the drums come in.
Yeah, because those were played by Alan and then and then snipped up and then.
That's right, and just trying to get the intensity and the depth and the ambience, it was, some of it was,
and they were dry. The drum.
Yeah, they're just playing dry tracks. You had to create the reverbs, create the balance between the 3 different instruments or whatever it was.
You had to get the balance right.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, Rob.
Bad. By the way, surround.
Yes. For those of you that don't know, surround is our drinking word if you joined us late.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'd say, but then, tracks like Clean, we had a lot of fun with because maybe the stereo version didn't do justice to the song. It's one of my favorite Depeche Mode songs, Clean, and the surround just allowed you to give it the space that it deserves from the word go. When Dave's singing the lyrics, he's on his own with the bass line, and it gives you a real kind of like space to immediately put the listener into a particular place,
On Violator, I've often said on my channel that I always hold up Violator as probably the most outstanding electronic record of all times. I'm going to let you hear what Kevin actually has to say about Violator. I say it's the best electronic album of all time.
I think it's one of the best records of all time.
He says it's one of the best records of all time.
I mean, certainly the production on it.
That's a big statement.
I hold that record up with some whatever. I'd put my record up against your record any day.
The Dark Side of the Moon and all those big ones.
Like if you listen to Violator from start to finish, it's one of the few records where you go, every song is absolutely amazing.
Also explain the thing, Kevin. You said You said there's no fat on that record.
Yeah, there's no fat. Like every sound has a purpose.
There's nothing there that's just
No,
fizzle.
No,
Everything
nothing.
has such a.
I mean, the record is like. I mean, Flood told me once. He said, when we made the record and we put it all together, and then because generally when in days of old, you made the record, you mixed 11 songs or the 10 songs, and then you put them together on the 1/2-inch tape, and then you had a playback session in the studio where the whole band could hear the records and go, okay, there is the running order good? Is one record louder than the other? Do we need to do something? And Flood and Daniel looked at each other and just said, yeah, we've got something here. This is really good. And I think people really recognized that the record was going to be something very special.
Also, guys, just for context, yeah, Rob, I'll probably when this video goes up, I'll post a link to the interview I did with Pino Pescatola. In fact, I'll try and bring him onto this chat as well sometime. Pino Pescatola said that the amount of Pino Pescatola was obviously one of the engineers during the first leg of the Violator production, and he said when Flood came into that studio, he said he'd worked with some of the best engineers and producers around, but when Flood came in there, he said this was a level that he'd never seen before. He said the attention to detail. So watch that video. But another thing, and there's many of these things, when it was mastered by 5 different mastering engineers, and they did a blindfold. I mean, they just took everything to the highest extreme. And I also asked the question to Pino at the end. I said, if we made Violator now using today's technology, would it sound the same? And I think Pino said you'd get close, but it wouldn't be the same. Kevin, you
couldn't get anywhere near it.
Kevin said,
I don't think you'd get anywhere near it.
I also think because the limitation that was available in technology those days, because limitation sometimes drives your creativity. Yeah. So you think we wouldn't even come close?
No, I don't think you'd get near it. And the mastering thing, that's something that Mute and Depeche Mode did a lot.
I've mastered 5 different.
Yeah, you'd send it out to 3 or 4 people, and then you'd have a blind test and see which one you liked.
Who was the master on Violator? Who did the mastering?
I don't know who the mastering is on Violator.
Someone check that up quickly. Who did the mastering on Violator? That actually, I've got the vinyl here. I'll pull it up quickly.
With the vinyl.
Oh, that's probably easier to read than my CD then.
Always have it in case of an emergency.
Open it up.
Sleeve as
yeah,
well.
yeah. Look
at
at this. Yeah, we go. So there we go. This is probably on the sleeve notes.
It's the surround version.
Inside there.
Probably sleeve notes in here.
Rob, do you have all the surround versions?
Yes, I do. And that brings up a point. So, Kevin,
yes,
the only Depeche Mode album that is not available in surround sound is Spirit. Now, can we lobby Mute Records to get them to have you do that? Because I'm a completist. I want a full collection of all their albums in 5.1.
This is a remastered. Simon Hayworth.
No, that's the remaster. No, that's not the vinyl. Mike Marsh. He would have done it.
Mike Marsh. There we go. So that was the one they chose. Yeah, and there was Blindfold. So you get
that'll be the vinyl.
For the vinyl, yeah.
Spirit. That's one of the late. Is that the late? That's not the latest.
That is the latest, but they did not release a 5.1 version.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to lobby them. I'm happy to do the record, but I think it's a good idea.
I think I might actually like the album if it was done 5.1.
I absolutely think that you guys would hear more details than you think are there, actually, because it seems so minimalist, but there is a lot going on. So I'm sure you would hear.
Producer on that, is that Ben Hillier again?
I think it was the same guy they've been using.
Ben Hillier.
No, it was a Swedish guy.
Daniel's here. Let's ask Daniel.
Okay, that might explain something then.
Well, I've got the.
There we go.
I got the question. Why would you petition Mute when it's a Sony release?
Oh, that's right.
That was the thing I was going to suggest. But I think if you look actually on the credits, I think it's licensed.
No, Mute's not in charge of it.
Nothing to do with it at all.
It's just a it's a tribute to Mute. Basically, the logo is still on everything. I mean,
I still think they I don't know how. I don't know if Daniel has anything to do with the record. I don't know, but
I mean, he might be invited to listen to everything, but
Yeah.
no, it's Sony. Sony's doing everything.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think, yeah. Then you probably have to go to Sony, but then again, how
They
interesting.
probably don't care then, right?
I wouldn't be so harsh as to say they don't care. They just
Oh, well, I think
doing
they've got other
5-1.
things to think about,
Yeah.
Maybe spatial audio. I mean, I think the next thing to do is to redo all the records in spatial audio.
Oh, well, you're the man for that, eh?
Yeah, I'd love to do that in the Dolby Atmos.
So, Kevin, what was the last Depeche Mode album that you did?
Sounds of the Universe, I think.
That was the last one.
So
Sounds
Delta Machine came out in 5.1, but you didn't do that one, right?
Oh, Delta Machine. No, I don't remember doing that.
Okay. Yeah, and it was differently packaged. I think it came with the Live in Berlin, or
Yeah,
so.
I don't remember doing Delta Machine. Sounds of the Universe I definitely got hold of, and because I remember being in the studio with Ben doing it, and I think that's after that point. That's when Daniel had bought the Mute record label back from EMI at that point.
So Daniel, the archivist, do you have a question for Kevin?
No, I'm just watching.
No,
Oh, cool.
I just put him on there because he would know a lot of the things that we're possible.
So Kevin, if we should introduce him then, at least.
Yeah.
This is Daniel, the archivist, who's in charge of like a lot of the Depeche Mode catalog stuff. So,
where are you based?
Well, I even have your stuff.
Where are you based?
Simon sent over all the master files for the surrounds. So I'm
What,
trying to
inside?
archive technically everything onto a couple of different digital sources.
Where are you based?
Burbank, California.
Okay. Oh, okay. What? Okay. Why would they bring all the stuff over to there? Out of curiosity.
Because since 2016, I've been in charge of the entire vault.
Okay. So did you get all the stuff from EMI then?
From Hayes. We've been transferring it as we go for the 12-inch single box sets. I'm the person that's picking all the mixes for the boxes.
Great. Well, then you have my full sympathy.
Yeah, I was listening to you discussing clean.
In terms of finding versions, I know how difficult that can be.
No, it's been fun trying to figure out which one is the master, because that's always fun. But even on the multi-track discussion, because some people don't realize the multi-tracks are dry as hell.
I know.
You have to add effects. Anybody who has the singles 8698 and here's what Mute tried to do for, say, Policy of Truth, where delays are set to the wrong millisecond. Yeah, that's just a beginning to the nightmare.
But is that because there's the wrong version on there? That must be just the wrong version.
No, there's a couple on 8698 that somebody went back to try to remaster it. And by remastering, they forgot to set delays on echoes. And it just sounds slightly different, but it's enough to where you notice, oh, they actually had access to the multi-tracks when they were doing this.
Okay, you don't think that maybe it's just a different version? Because
on this one, no.
Okay.
On this one and a few others, there's a couple where it's something completely different. Because on all the multi, you saw alone, just going through, say, Enjoy the Silence, all the
there's
dry tape
tens of
passes.
versions.
Yeah, and then the tape passes where it's like going for 16 minutes where they're trying to do the best bits and then they slice from that. There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, well, we could chew a few beers over that job.
Yeah, it's some of it's not fun.
No, some of it's not fun, but it is exciting when you can't get it and then you get told it's small hall and it all falls into place. And when you get that version, you think, yes. It's like finding the piece of the jigsaw puzzle. I think there's something quite exciting about that. It's a complete ball ache when you can't find it.
The only one that's been a nightmare so far was I was trying to find the original flexi-disc version of Never Turn Your Back on Mother Earth, and then talking with a few people, it turned out that was Martin's demo. So it explains why it wasn't in the vault.
So did you get a copy of it, or did you just have to
No,
go back?
we did. I was going to use it for something, but then it just got scrapped because it just like, well, it's not in the vault. Trying to get Martin to find it amongst his cassettes might be a little difficult. So just
No, that
gave up on that.
Wouldn't happen. No.
Daniel, have you heard all the 5.1 surround mixes?
I've disassembled them. Yeah. I mean, when they first came out, I remember listening to them, and then I'm like, you know, from the mashup point of view, I'm like, let's see how much of the vocals in the center channel. So I extracted out the 5.1s and had some fun with those. Thank you for that. That's actually a good thing. How do you feel about all the fans who are like me? You know, besides being, yeah, I've done official remixes, but I also have fun doing mashups on the side. Fans do fan remixes. Inadvertently, you've given them a lot of separation to play with. What do you think of all the remixes that have come out that have been based off of people just extracting the 5.1?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think, I don't think, those are kind of things to be enjoyed, right? I mean, those are kind of things that with today's technology, I mean, I think two things. At the time of doing them, the technology that we had today didn't exist. So that access that everyone has, like in this small laptop that we're using to make incredibly powerful records, that didn't exist. And we weren't thinking, oh, you know what, what's going to happen in like 10 years' time with X, Y, and Z? Because you're just going to restrict yourself in what you're doing. You might as well just release the stereo versions if you're going to do that. And in terms of people making content, I think the band would be absolutely delighted.
It just makes them richer and
it
makes it more accessible.
Yeah, I think they're delighted. I can't see them going, well, why has that happened?
Yeah,
let's crush that person.
No.
I mean, what would be the point in that?
I mean, I would have been crucified a long time ago, but
no, exactly. And I think bands these days are actually, they want that interaction with fans. Maybe at the time that they made the record, the record company didn't want that interaction. And I'm not just talking about Depeche Mode, I'm talking about bands, and there was a distance between the fans and the artist. Today that distance doesn't exist. The fans and the artist, or the artist seemingly wants to be right alongside the fans. That's why, that's what Instagram's for, that's what Twitter's for, that's what Facebook's for. Those things are there so bands can get involved on a direct level.
Yeah.
And I don't think they'd have any problem with someone taking the vocal from the center channel and doing something.
Oh no, but my thing is, I didn't mean the band. I meant you. Like, how do you feel? It's you took time to isolate and make a surround mix, and then people are cherry picking part of it to use it for other stuff. How do you feel about that? Not how the band feels.
I don't care. It's not my thing.
It's inevitable.
It's gonna happen. Yeah. People are trying to do that from stereo masters.
Yeah.
You go online. There's people telling you they can take the lead vocal from a stereo track.
Yeah, RX8, you can do that.
Yeah. There you go. Or Melodyne. Or whatever. That's not my concern, really. I don't feel, and I'll be honest, until you just brought it up, I never even thought about it.
let me hit you with a follow-up, because we're sort of in the same boat. When you play around with the tapes enough for the job, when you're not doing quote unquote the job, do you have fun messing around with the multi-tracks just for your own benefit?
No.
Seriously?
No.
Not just to sit there and say like, oh, this acapella sounds nice, or
no, because for me, the task in hand was so difficult. I'll be honest, I couldn't listen to Depeche Mode for about 3 years. In fact, when I got married, I was in Malta in a shopping mall, and they played Depeche Mode.
You ran out.
And I said to my wife, I said, can you believe it? Bloody Depeche Mode here. It's like, I've been working on this bloody thing for like 18 months, constantly in my head, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. and I'm like 300, 1,000 miles away in water to get married, and bloody Depeche Mode. It's like, can we just get out of here?
I mean,
Took me ages to get past them.
I mean, I don't listen to Depeche Mode. I never listen to Depeche Mode anymore either. I don't. And I never. And it's quite funny. You get these people, they work in these Depeche Mode bars. I just think that would be the death of me. Because the thing is, I worked in restaurants before, and there were songs that I liked, but because these songs were playing over and over, you associated that song with your shitty job. So it's like, I could, to me, to work in a bar and then playing Depeche Mode all the time, I wouldn't want it.
To give you another thing, I've been going to a boxing gym for about the last 6 months, about a year, and the guy that owns the gym is a huge Depeche Mode fan, and for some reason he thought, "Oh, Kevin's here, I'll play some Depeche Mode." Kevin's here, he'll appreciate this.
Cancel the membership. Yeah.
So he was playing all the live concerts.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, you like this one, Kevin, don't you? And I'm like, yeah. You know, like, I worked on it. Really? Okay, so that was an incentive for him to play more Depeche Mode. Right? When he heard that I'd worked on them. And one day I said to him, I said, "Look, I can't miss me funny. Can we play something other than Depeche Mode?"
Well, it's funny because
not that I don't like them. Don't get me wrong. Violator's an amazing album.
And
I love that record.
It's funny that there's the respect for it, because a lot of the fans in global here as well, they think that Gareth Jones sits and listens to Depeche Mode all the time. He like when I was there the last time, we opened Black Celebration, and he said he hadn't listened to it for like 10 or 15 years or something.
Yeah.
You'll pull it up for a
Well,
reference.
you don't. When you work on a record for 6 months,
because
you don't want to hear it. You know the record inside out.
But
and it's only years later when it's played in a random place.
Also, the fans,
think,
fans don't seem to sort of very often, even me. I mean, as a fan, you realize that this was a job for you. You're not a fan. You don't go and listen to it all the time.
I mean, it's more than the job. It's great to be involved in something so incredible and iconic.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I let go of that, and then you move on to the next thing.
Okay, I'm definitely I got another question then.
Yeah, go on.
Besides Depeche, I mean, I've done other bands as well. I don't fall into what you're talking about. I can still listen to the music. With that being said, is there an artist you've worked with and done a surround mix of that you can still listen to at the end of the day afterwards and care about?
I can still listen to Depeche Mode now.
No, but I mean, you're saying, you've been a little gun shy about it after if you had to listen to the same thing for say 3 or 6 months straight doing a surround mix. No, use a different band, for example? Is there somebody else you've worked on that you would listen to after?
I think inevitably every record I've ever worked on. Well, there's 2 reasons why you don't want to work on it. Number 1, you heard it a lot. Number 2, you're judging your work on it.
Yeah.
And you're not listening to the band. You're listening to your contribution to the record. So all you hear in that immediate aftermath, if you like, is, I could have done that better. Why is that sounding like that? I don't like this. That's good, but...
Yeah.
And you're constantly critiquing your own work of what you've done on it.
And it's too late to go and change it.
And you think, oh, can Vaughn hear that? Because I can hear that.
Yeah.
Does is the guy in the vault, does he know how bad that I think that sounds?
Yeah.
And you're hearing it for what it is.
Yeah.
I'm hearing it for what it could have been or what it was. And that takes a time. You have to go past time for that to disappear from your head, for that song to be kind of diluted from your short-term memory.
Yeah.
And be replaced by the next project. It's a bit like when I work on a project, I don't go home and start listening to music.
No.
When I'm working in the studio, I go home and listen to anything but music because I want to clear my head of melody and rhythm and arrangement. I just want to listen to words. So I'll watch a bit of TV, listen to a talk radio, something, listen to nothing, sit in silence and just read a book. You don't want to be listening to music.
It's quite interesting. Like Gary Newman was asked, what music do you listen to? He said, I don't listen to any music. He only listens to his own music. Another one was Morton Harkett from Aha. He said music's like noise. It's just like chewing. Because he says they don't listen to music, and you know,
a lot of artists are like that.
Yeah,
a lot of artists are like that. They don't listen to anything else apart from the thing they're making.
Yeah,
they don't even listen to stuff they've done before.
Yeah.
They only listen to what they're listening to at that moment in time.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's quite common.
Really interesting, because when I listen to my band, I'm like, damn, I'm so good.
Well, that's probably because you are. You know.
I'm finally gonna bring Larry on. Bless him, he's been waiting for like an hour until it's his time. So let's go.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt anybody.
No, you're good.
Larry, go for it.
Oh, look at that! Rob's got my autographed album.
Okay, so
I'm gonna have to check that out.
So I wanted to ask you, Kevin. So, what was one of your greatest moments working at Mute Records?
Oh.
Was it when Flood phoned you and gave you the answer to the reverb?
No, that was a relief. Not necessarily as a greatest moment. I mean, there's so many moments at Mute. I mean, that label gave me the opportunity to work not only with so many great artists. Some are very successful, others are maybe not so successful, but they're still amazing. It gave me a chance to work on lots of different types of music. And I'm talking about things as varied as obviously super successful Depeche Mode, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Erasure, Moby, Goldfrapp, Yazoo, you know, individual albums by Dave Gahan, right the way down to literally the sound of gravel sliding down a chute, but recorded incredibly well and put out on record, like with Neubauten, or Boyd Rice, or Pansonic, or right the way through to people like Luke Slater, Speedy J, Plastic Man, Richie Hawtin, and 100 artists in between all of those great people. I have to say, one of the great, or I could probably name 3 great things at Mute off the top of my head. The first one is when I first went outside of the studio to work on a Mute record, which was recording Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And we went to Abbey Road and we worked in Studio 2 at Abbey Road, the very famous Beatles studio, and we made a record there. That was a really important moment for me as a person, because I was trusted to go out of the studio and represent the studio, not only the studio, but record with Nick Cave. And it was a very important moment for me. The other time was when I worked with David Bowie, and David Bowie was sitting in the studio with me, and the producer had left the room, and David said, okay, I'm going to go and record some vocals. Are you ready? And I'm like, me? Like, are you talking to me? Like, no. He said, yeah, come on, off we go. And I'm like, okay, all right, okay. And he sung some lyrics on a song, and I stopped the tape, and he went, so what do you think, Kevin? And
so what do you think, Kevin?
No, he just like literally in this really dry, close up front microphone, dark dude. So what do you think, Kevin? And I thought, oh shit, okay, what do I do here? Like, it wasn't the best thing he'd ever done. It wasn't the worst.
But you were so starstruck that you just recorded Bowie.
No, I just thought, well, like, what do I'm looking for the producer, like desperately thinking, where the hell is the producer?
Yeah.
Come in and save my bacon here. And I'm thinking, well, what do I say? And I just went, I think it sounded okay, but I think you can do it better.
Yeah.
And everything just went incredibly silent. And you know those silences when they become uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know those uncomfortable silences.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh shit, I'm in a lot of trouble here. And the silence went on, and he just went, okay, let's do it again. And I thought, oh, Jesus Christ, thank God for that.
You didn't say, do you know who I am?
Let's
dance.
I'll tell you a funny thing about Let's Dance, actually, but this is not the David Bowie thing, but still. And then maybe that's another time when we're eating pizza. I'll tell you the David Bowie. And the other time is doing the 5.1 back catalogue, not only for Depeche, but for Nick Cave, for Golf Rap, for Moby. What else did we do? Because at that time there were only maybe 4 or 5 engineers in London doing the 5.1 thing, and I really wanted to do the catalogue. I really wanted to do it, and I said to the manager of the studio, I said to Daniel, do you mind if I do a mix and see what you think? And he was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And I did my mix, and I spent a long time trying to get it right, listening to loads of stuff and really trying to get what I thought was right. Daniel came in and we had a blind shootout between me and 2 other engineers. And at the end of it, Daniel said, I really like that one. That's the one. Who did that? And that was my mix. And that gave me the opportunity to work on all of those great records.
Wow.
And that was a moment for me personally in my career, where you thought, okay, I've stepped up here. I've stepped up a level.
By the way, where can I get some reverb?
Where can you get some reverb?
Yeah,
you're going to need a lot of reverb for a two-seater fan.
That's harsh, man.
No, hey, man.
Is it a large hall that he needs?
Largest hall.
Is it cathedral or outside car park?
Canyon.
A large stadium.
Also, which brand of reverb?
Anyone, it doesn't matter. Reverb equals girls. You just got to remember that equation.
That is just bizarre.
R equals G.
Oh yeah, that's the Martin Gore formula. R equals G.
R squared.
I always thought that the R stood for Rob, but
Why not? Rob equals girls.
I could actually imagine Fletch coming up with that. I don't know.
Quite possibly.
Yeah,
it's definitely.
Equals, he had
it's
the time
definitely
to
a Fletch thing. It's definitely a Fletch thing.
Mom,
so before
Mom,
we
I need reverb.
That was a good question, Larry. Before we go to our next question, though, I had a quick follow up. Before we got on, you mentioned that the very first record you were on was a Nitzareb 10-inch. What time frame was that around?
That would have been 1991.
Oh, okay. So I guess probably around the Ebhead time.
I Give to You came in a 10-inch.
Oh, okay. That might have been.
I have it right behind me, I think.
What do you have? It's like the black and white one. It's a remix one though. It's got a remix by Phil Kelsey, and that's my first ever credit on a record, and I remember that very distinctively.
It's not this one?
No, definitely not that one. No.
Okay. So is it? No, I will have
but
to
that
look
was like
that up.
as an assistant engineer. That was like the first acknowledgement that I'd ever contributed anything in the music industry.
I'll look that up while we go to the next questions. Go ahead, Atusa. You want to introduce our next questions?
Sure. Hey, Mike, are you ready to ask your question?
Yeah. Hi guys. Hi Kevin. I'm not a geek with music at all, but I'll tell you what. I think Rob will say that I've been very anti 5.1, but actually talking or listening to you, I'm gonna travel to California tomorrow, sit in Rob's room, listen to the 5.1. I'm there. It's going to be cheaper than buying a bloody system anyway. So, but with all the geek talk, but you've really expressed it really for a layman. I'm not a musician or anything like that, and it's been so interesting to listen to you and how talented you are and everything. It's been absolutely amazing. So, one of the questions was, with all the stuff you've done with the mode, especially the 5.1. other than Alan, did any of the other band bother, or did they just?
No, none of the other band got involved on any serious level. They all heard the records, I believe, at the end of them, but from my experience, the band are actually quite cool about things happening without them kind of being involved to a degree. Once they've kind of done something, they're thinking about the next thing. They're not necessarily holding on to the past. And I think they've always been quite like that, actually.
No, that's cool. And talking about David Bowie and stuff, so there was a question in the chat. Do you remember which album that was? Or
yeah, that was an album called Hours.
Yeah.
And it was also the songs that we made for that record were part of a video game, and it was one of the first ever video games that had music made for it by a recording artist. And the video game was called Omnicron.
Thanks. I was to say, I thought this was going to be a little bit over the top for me, but I've really enjoyed listening to you guys. So thanks very much.
You're welcome. I honestly, when I present my lectures at university, I could probably sell 5.1 systems all day long. I should be a salesman.
Well, you sold one to me, but I just need to find the money for it. But thanks.
Well, 5.1 systems aren't that expensive. I honestly, I don't know about in America, but in England, you can get a 5.1 system for like £250.
All right. Well, if you point me in the right direction, I'll get that sorted for my new flat. Cheers.
Okay, no problem. We'll see what we can do.
I just
Cheers,
recently upgraded mine. I had an older one that it had like the 1080 HD kind of inputs on the HDMI. So I wanted the 4K.
Yeah.
And it has the Dolby Atmos and the 7.1, all that stuff. But I haven't hooked up the 7.1 speakers yet, only in 5.1 right now. But when I do, what should I expect from your mixes? Will it be more of the front, or what is the...
I'm not quite sure, because I think a lot of, certainly what you're probably bound to, unless your system is a discrete system. Yeah, do we know what that means?
No.
So discrete means that you play the CD or you play the DVD, and it's got 6 channels on it, and those 6 channels will feed into an amplifier, and from the amplifier you will have 6 separate outputs, and that is the way that I mixed it in the studio in that configuration. There are some records that will not have 6 discrete channels, and they may only have 2, but there's an algorithm built into the amplifier or the soundbar in your case that will fake a surround version. And so you might find that your Dolby Atmos or your 7.1 fakes the surround version.
I think it's probably discrete, because it is a separate like Denon tuner.
Amplifier.
Yeah. So that's, and then I have all the speakers connected separately. So
yeah, but if you were to do it through the Dolby Atmos soundbar or something like that, there's probably an algorithm within the Dolby Atmos to take whatever comes in and put it out into 7 speakers, which obviously you don't have that. There is no 7.1 version of Depeche Mode. So whatever it would produce would be in some ways manufactured by the makers of the unit, and therefore you don't necessarily want to have that version. But there might be a setting on your amplifier to say 5.1, and you can set it to 5.1.
And it'll just turn off the other 2 speakers then, or?
Yeah, yes, and then it wouldn't have and then you set it to 5.1, and then possibly look for a setting that says discrete. And then once you have those 2 settings in place, that should make sure what you're hearing is what was recorded.
We had a great comment in the chat right now. This conversation brought to you by Best Buy.
And Walmart.
Let's bring on Tammy. Tammy, you have another question?
Yeah. So this is the geeky side, I think. So when you're listening and working on something like an artist like Depeche Mode, more electronic, obviously, and you're working with somebody like Nick Cave, who I adore also, Like,
Right.
how are you listening, or do you listen differently when you're listening for how to put these things together and the sound? And I mean, I'm sure their approaches are different as well, and their atmospheres are different. So how are you approaching these different artists?
I think whether I'm working with Depeche Mode, Nick Cave, Vaughn, any one of you who brings their work to me, I'm only listening in one way, and that's generally I'm listening to the song
as a whole, yeah,
and I'm allowing the song to guide me as to how I should create the atmosphere for that song. For me, when you're making records, you have to listen to what is coming out of the speakers, and you use your intuition and your experience, I guess, to create the mood that you believe the song is trying to create with you. And it might sound like a little bit silly, but you kind of almost go into like you sort of get in. This is fairly kind of esoteric, but you get into a trance almost, and you start just kind of doing things. The song says, okay, this is how it should feel. This is where the texture should be. This is what you're trying to create here. And I'm not talking about recreating something. I'm talking about creating something from scratch. And then you do what you think is right, and then inevitably the artist will come in and go, yeah, you know what, you kind of got it completely wrong. Or they'll come in and go, actually, that's kind of spot on, but can we do this? And then from that moment in time, nothing is right or wrong, it's just differences of opinion. And then I have to let myself go out of the process and not be attached to what's coming out. And I have to let the artist guide me to the end of the process, because ultimately it's not my record. It's never my record. It's always the artist's record. I mean, that's how I work. And I know a lot of producers and engineers work like that. Some producers and engineers say, this is the way I do things, and if you don't like it, then get someone else. I'm not one of those people. I listen to the music, the song directs me, the artist directs me, and we make something that we find the common ground with. And generally, I think that works really well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Thank you. And it's hard for me not to ask a million Nick Cave questions, but we're not here for Nick Cave. So
okay.
But thank you very much.
You can ask a Nick Cave question if you want, though.
Yeah. So I guess the question is then, just in terms of his approach to the music, what have you observed and how he, I know he's obviously very passionate, just like Martin Gore and Depeche Mode. So what are some of these things that you've observed in his recording process that you think would be interesting for us to know?
Well, the two artists make records in two completely different ways. I mean, completely different ways. Depeche Mode is a real studio-based band. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is that they come in with a demo, and the producer with the band exaggerate the demo. Yeah. I mean, if you've maybe heard some of the demos for Enjoy the Silence, and maybe they're acoustic guitar versions, or the tempo might be really slow, and the producer will guide the direction of the records, and the band, I would say, would go, yeah, I like that, but I don't like that. Let's pursue this. Let's not go there. And they would work on a song for a period of time, and then revisit it again and again and again. With a band like Nick Cave, basically what happens in the studio with Nick Cave is that they get a group of members together and they just play. And when I mean play, they play for 8 hours a day for about 4 days. And so we have 32 hours of music, lots of different ideas, no preconceived songs, no preconceived melodies, nothing. Nick will have a bunch of lyrics, and when a groove or a musical idea is played by one or a number of the band, he will jump onto that and he will start singing, or he will start singing something and all the band will join in. But essentially we have a whole group of stuff, and then we edit it all down. We go away and listen to it. Nick will draw out from that 32 hours of music. He might say, okay, out of the 32 hours, I've got 2 hours of stuff that I like, and this will form the basis of the record. And from that moment in time, we're adding stuff to what's already there, but those ideas are literally made up in the studio. Whereas a band like Depeche Mode, those ideas are constructed kind of piece by piece.
Yeah.
Two very different ways.
And Tammy, it's also interesting if you watch the interview with Pino Pescatola. This was quite mind-blowing for me. As Kevin's just said, is Depeche Mode will come to the studio with basically the songs are done. I mean, they're complete songs, and now we're going to take what Martin's done and we're going to develop them. And of course, if you listen to the demos in recent years, the demos are very well developed, and the finished record's not that far from the demo.
That's right.
If we go back to peak sort of Alan Wilder area, he actually Alan used to say to Martin, because if you listen to the demos of like Shake the Disease and stuff, they were quite well developed. All the parts were there, but he asked Martin to be very, very sparse, so there was more room for them to go. So this is the difference. They come in, it's finished. I mean, they know what the songs are. They're just going to develop them. And the final thing is on Violator. A lot of people don't know this. Is Martin did a lot of those demos on the old BT machine. Yeah. And a lot of and so a lot of the MIDI. So a lot of the parts that Martin brought in. So he's done all the MIDI parts. They would just plug that straight into the ARP 2600 thing. And a lot of Martin's original MIDI parts were triggering the actual performances that we heard in Violator, which was interesting to hear.
Yeah. But they work into. This is not a Nick Cave thing, this is not a Nick Cave session.
It's good for reference, yeah.
But Nick Cave makes records like no one else I've ever make records with. The way he does it. Most bands do the Depeche Mode kind of way.
Like it's written and then they just
they develop the ideas and they're coming into the studio just to nail that particular song.
So he comes in with no ideas and they just
they make it up literally like
on the fly. So and that can be quite expensive. So it's just like
no, not really. They make their records quite quickly, but what they do is they play for, like I say, they play for 4 days, 8 hours a day. They take everything away, and from that 32 hours of music or 30 hours, whatever it is.
So it's coming to a studio with no songs written and just
it's got a book of lyrics.
So it's almost like improvisation and just coming up with it.
And particularly with Nick Cave and Warren, they're making stuff up on the spot. I like that. Okay, that's good. Let me play. And then all of a sudden, within a minute, they're making the song, and it's like being produced before your eyes.
That's amazing.
It's just two very different ways of working.
That was awesome. Thank you both.
Thanks, Tammy.
Welcome.
Thanks, Tammy.
All right, I'm bringing on Mike LaJoy. Let's see. Go on, Mike.
I found the single.
That's the one.
Yep, I have the CD, not the 10-inch.
That's the one. The same.
Yep.
You got my credit on there?
Yep, track 2.
This is by Kevin Paul. Bill Kelsey remix.
It says assistance, Kevin Paul.
That's right. Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
Nice.
There you go. Great catch. Thank you.
That's
and
all
that was while you were at Conch Studios, for those that
did
not catch that earlier. So
yeah, Conch is where I first started out. That's a studio owned by the Kinks, if you know those guys.
Ray Davies?
Ray Davies, yeah. And
didn't know that.
Mutes used to do a lot of stuff at Conch.
So that studio was built on royalties from "Hello, I Love You" by the Doors, then, right?
From many records, but yeah, I wouldn't
so
say that to his face.
the Kinks sued the Doors for that song, basically, and and they won in the UK only, I think. But yeah,
I know who the Kinks are.
They're a great band. Mute used to do a lot of stuff there, and then from there, I was asked to come down to Mute and help expand their studio there. And I spent, over 10 years there.
I would like to give another plug into, for those that weren't on earlier, to follow on Twitter and Instagram. It's KP Mixbus.
Yeah.
So you can follow on Twitter and Instagram, and he has a great podcast with guests like Gareth Jones, who I was listening to that podcast, and yeah, it's great stuff. So
we've got people like Alan Mulder who worked on a lot of mute stuff. We'll be doing people like Daniel Miller, Flood, Dave McCracken, Ben Hillier. He's been recorded for the series, and they're not out yet.
So you just look that up on wherever you get your podcasts, basically, and it's Mixbus, right?
Mixbus with Kevin Paul.
We're going to discuss it over our pizza just now, but Kevin's obviously a little bit like let's bring in the pet shop voice thing. No, sorry, I'm being very cheesy now. I'm just kidding. Because he's got the content, and a lot of the producers I've approached have just gone, get out of here, small fry. So he's basically got the content, but I've got we've got a reasonable audience, and a lot of the content that Kevin has produced is this is the audience. So we are looking at we're aligning. My Geek Talk series is going to align with Mixbus, and we're going to look at how we're going to present that. But you guys here in Depeche Mode Global will be the first to hear how we're going to do that. Yeah. And I want to thank you, Rob, seriously, mate, for everything you've done, not only for Depeche Mode and that, but and for everyone, keeping everyone sane during lockdown, but also for supporting me and my community. So I want to actually, I've got a drink here, but raise a drink to Rob Rom already.
Well, cheers to you guys. Thank you for doing this as well, and
appreciate that.
By the way, guys,
why don't you share a little bit about what Kevin's doing for your music, Vaughn George?
It's a quick one. But basically, Kevin's got these great ears, and I'm obviously producing everything, and then I basically finished the song to about 90%. Now I'm capable of mixing my own stuff. And it's difficult because when you work with a mix engine, every mix engineer I've worked with, sometimes it's like it just never sounds like me. So I always mix my own stuff because whether you like it or not, it needs, I just want it to sound a particular way, and I think that's important. But I get Andy Marlowe in, who's a great I play some basic guitar and some of the stuff, and then Andy Marlowe does these great guitar effects, and so basically I do it to about 90%, because if you're a producer here, you'll know it's that final mix that can take so much time. So I give it to Andy because I trust him, and then Kevin's kind of like the final. Now we send it to Kevin, and Kevin does pick it apart. Like he'll send it back and go, I think your drum can be louder. Always attacks me, my vocals aren't loud enough. That's because I feel I can't sing that well. Anyway, so bottom line is then Kevin does the final mastering. Kevin's almost like the final. If he says it's good to go, then we go with Kevin. So he's got this. And I must mention also, Kevin is very, very approachable. If there's anyone here, remember, I think sometimes we look at people like Kevin as, like a legend and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not blowing smoke up his ass, but he is very approachable. So if you are a producer and you're looking for some, you're looking to get your music mixed or something like that, Kevin is available. Remember, this is the guy who did what he did. His rates are reasonable, but it is done on a project by project basis. So, and he does care about your music. He doesn't sort of just listen to it and send it back. He really cares. So this is why he will be mastering my record and probably many to come. So
yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was taught very early on in the recording studio is that whether you're the guy that sells 10 million records or you're the guy that sells one copy, when you come into the studio, it's probably the most important day of your life. If you're a creative person, it might be the only time you're ever there. Then again, it might be the time that you've been there, 100 times before. But for me, although I've been there or I'm there every single day, I always remember that for the person coming in, it's like I say, it's probably the most important day of their lives. And whether I'm working on the guy that you've never heard of or the guy that everyone's heard of, I put the same amount of effort into every project. And that's not unique to me. Most producers and engineers approach making any sort of creative arts in that way, you know, and I think that's really important. And it's like Vaughn says, one of the services I offer apart from mixing and producing is a service where you can send me your record and I can give you some opinions on it rather than maybe physically do anything for you, like a consultation, if you like. Offer a little consultation of your work, and hopefully that will give you some advice and some pointers as to onto how to make your music better.
I'm also I just want to say something. Yeah, Rob, is also, you know, especially these days, you know, obviously us guys have been around a lot younger than longer than some of the younger producers. And I always say to the younger producers that I'm coaching, I say, you know, the information you get for free on YouTube today, well, not all of it, but a lot of it, is information that we would have paid a lot for back, you know, 20 years ago. I think the challenge these days is not to find the information, but it's to filter out all the crap. And something I find, you know, without pissing on anyone's parade, is that the people like Kevin on that level and the people like Gareth and stuff, they're not the ones shouting the loudest, probably because they've got nothing to prove. There's so many people on YouTube saying, this is how you make a great record and stuff. And I understand everyone's trying to find their space in the world. What does happen, what tends to happen, is that these people who don't really have the best advice are shouting the loudest. And it's these guys who are the actual gurus who are kind of passively in the background there, probably because they've got nothing to prove. But it does mean that they get kind of forgotten. And I'm kind of saying, hey man, if you want to, you know, if you want some good advice, I mean, Kevin's one of my great mentors now. Gareth's remixing a track for me, which I feel so blessed about. But they are very, very approachable. And I think people forget that these people, because I think there is the tendency of us to kind of look up to you, go, oh my God, you're unapproachable. But they are approachable, and they are available. So as I say, Kevin and I are joining forces now, and there's going to be a lot of exciting stuff to come. And you guys, you're on Depeche Mode Global. Rob, you'll be the first to hear about everything. Obviously, after my platform first, but at the same time, you'll hear about everything.
Yeah, I mean, you know, someone like Gareth for me is a mentor, you know, and he's as humble today as he was when I met him 25, 30 years ago. You know, he's such a genuine person for me. He's one of my idols, quite frankly.
The funny, all the conversations that I've had with Gareth as well is he never speaks technically. Everything's done very, of course, he's got the technical knowledge, but he approaches everything. And one of his nuggets of wisdom is that I've taken on board, and I always give to my students, is Gareth says, I'm going to do the voice. Hey, brother, it is not our job to make it. No, sorry. It's not our job to judge it. It is our job to make it. Yeah. And that is, as obvious as that sounds, he says your job as the artist is just to make it. You're not to judge it. And that's helped a lot. And he does a lot of Gareth's mentoring that I get. It's very, you know, he's not going to sit and say, hey, Vaughn, I'm going to show you how a compressor works. It's all, a lot of it's mindset.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to making music in general, I think a lot of people have highly focused on technical aspects. Yeah. And actually, a lot of that doesn't really count for much. What really counts is how do you feel about it? It's not what you're doing, it's why you're doing it. And certainly the producers that I've worked with, of which there are many, most of them aren't that technically aware. They're not the fastest on Pro Tools. They don't know every single shortcut. They don't know every single thing about every single piece of gear. But you know what? If you give them a Shure 57 microphone, they can make probably one of the greatest records you've ever heard. And that's because they know how to get the best out of the artist. And to be honest, if you get the best out of the artist, you've done 90% of the work.
It's all about vibe. I think Connie Plank, one of the great producers, he was apparently more, you know, he was all about vibe. And because I think if you're, we don't want to turn this too much into production now, but I've certainly found that I think people these days are they're too kind of caught up on, I'm going to use a classic example here. This blew my mind, I think, on the last chat when I had Gareth here on Depeche Mode Global. We were talking about, now if you're a producer, you know the lengths we go to get acoustics and, you know, to isolate the room, and you get your isolation booth. Then we take a song, one of Martin's best vocals ever, from the song Home from the Ultra album. It was basically Martin in the control room on it was something like an SM57, one take. And I was like, what, Gareth, you mean he sang that? And there's spill and bleed going to the mic? He's like, yeah, Vaughn. And I'm like, and that to me was an epiphany moment. I made a video on my channel once called the Gurus Don't Care and Nor Should You. And what I meant by that was, I think people like Gareth and on the level of Kevin, they're so focused on getting the great performance, whereas, it's the up and coming guys going to go, oh, are my walls, are the walls parallel? Oh, is this, so it does come down to performance. And a final thing I've actually noticed, as I've gotten older and I've gotten better as a producer, I would go back and listen to records that I heard when I was a lot younger. Yeah. You listen to them and they're not technically perfect. No. Take things like Lou Reed's Blue, A Perfect Day. If you criticize it technically, it's technically not perfect, but it is the essence and the performance that will always trump everything. And this is the biggest mistake we have these days, is we over-engineer everything.
Yeah. And one other record that Martin did in one take was
well, I'm down on my
One
knees
Caress.
again. One Caress. That's
a live recording
with
in
an orchestra.
the studio
With
in
an
Abbey
orchestra.
Road. That's a live recording, Abbey Road, with the string orchestra and Martin. One take.
Because there's no...
And it's incredible.
Because remember, guys, when you're recording an orchestra, there's no click track. They had to follow him. And that was all in one take. Yeah, that was mind-blowing as well.
It's an amazing vocal.
Yeah, it is.
But you isolate it and it's full of strings.
Yeah. So if you take the vocal part and also I'm hoping this is to inspire people who are recording their own records. I did a breakdown of Talks. It's My Life. I got the multi-tracks, and I always say it is the accumulation of all these imperfections that give us a great record. If you isolate the It's My Life from Mark Hollis, you can hear him going, funny how I found myself in love with you, and all the and when he finishes a note, instead of going in love with you, he goes in love with you. It's got all that in it, and I'm like, oh my god, these days we cut everything out. And a lot of these sort of synth riffs, they're like played by hand, and you get that's out of time. Yeah. But you put it together, it's perfect.
There you go.
These are the records we look up to. Yeah.
There you go, man.
Mike has a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought of one while we've been sitting here, and because you guys started talking about Gareth, it kind of cued my recollection. So when we had Gareth on, he talked about Pipeline being one of his favorite songs, if not his favorite song that he ever worked with Depeche Mode on.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to ask you, Kevin, was what was your experience working on that? Did Gareth come in for the 5.1? And if so, what was your interaction with him during that?
Well, we know Gareth is a very cool and calm man, and from what I can recall, he sort of came in and just went, "Yeah, man, it's sounding really good," but and he maybe just adjusted 2 or 3 things in what he thought he would want it to do, and thankfully most of the producers had the same approach, and those early albums, like I said at the start, there's not much to them in terms of the multi-track. They're 16-track recordings,
right,
maybe 24 when you get to some of the later albums before Music for the Masses. And so really it was just about getting that vibe, just about getting that balance between the reverb and the dry signals, and just making sure that we didn't sort of take it too far one way and not enough in the other, really. Very simple, really. That's
okay.
That was
cool.
Like I say, he's one of the coolest guys I know in the studio, like full stop,
Like a cucumber.
Yeah, like an ice cube.
Cool. Thanks.
Looks like a couple more, and then
Yeah, a couple more. Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up. I was letting people know out there at the last call for questions. I know Larry has another question, so we're going to let him ask.
What you got, Larry?
Okay, so is there any artist or band that you wish you worked with? Like anyone you look up to that you wish that you could work with?
Elvis.
Wish I'd worked with. I mean, that's a really difficult question, isn't it? Really, because there's hundreds of artists. No, do you know what? I'm pretty content with my lot.
Depeche
If I'm
Mode,
honest.
and, yeah, Nick Cave and all that. Yeah.
I don't think my time in the studio has been that bad. I mean, I could probably sit here and name some people that I'd love to have met. I don't often get starstruck. You know, there's very few people, if any, that I've kind of thought, oh, it's them. You know, you're too busy focusing on what you're supposed to be doing rather than who it is. You know, I'm pretty content with who I've worked with, frankly.
Wait, real quick. Somebody get a screenshot of this. Surround.
I took a screenshot for you, Larry.
It's blue raspberry, just for you, Tusa.
Be careful with all that sugar, Larry.
Yeah, man, it'll pin you off the ceiling.
Thanks, Larry.
All right, thanks, Larry.
Thanks, Larry.
So Kevin, I mean, obviously, Violator is one of your great achievements. Oh, Kia has one. We're going to bring him on in a second too. But outside of Violator, is there a particular track or album that you felt like turned out really amazing, and maybe one that you didn't expect to turn out so well? From Depeche Mode, that is.
From Depeche Mode. I am a big fan of Behind the Wheel. I think it's a great song. I think that's the start of Music for the Masses, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Never Let Me Down Again. I think.
No, it's the start of side 2.
Side 2. Right.
Side 2. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. But I really like that record. It's one of my favorite Depeche Mode records, I think. And going back to when we were talking about whether I listen to Depeche Mode, that's a record that I can listen to a lot, actually, and I really enjoy that record. On Violator, I really like Clean. I think that's a great record, and I think it's one of Depeche Mode's greatest songs, actually. I really like it.
I like Behind the Wheel too.
You know, on Behind the Wheel, on your surround version, the sample of the car going by or whatever, that is just amazing, the way it pans in the surround speakers.
And the hubcap as well at the start.
Yeah.
That's rolling round.
Yeah, that's really cool.
You know, it's got some great elements in it in terms of the surround. There's a lot of I mean, come on, you know, there's how many Depeche Mode songs are great? I mean, come on.
It seems like the later songs actually lend themselves very well, though, to being in surround.
Yeah, I think they're one of, like, if not the ultimate surround sound band. You know, they've got a really great balance between acoustic and electronic. They got song structure and they've got experimental. And for me, I mean, you know,
with great songs, experimental with great songs.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, the way they blend the two elements. You know, they're for me one of the best surround bands.
Cheers.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you. We have Kia online here now to ask a question as well.
Okay, Kia, how you doing?
Hey, great. First of all, I wanted to thank you for the masterpiece. I mean, each of those albums were reborn thanks to all the effort you put in. I've been fortunate enough to listen to them, get spoiled on them on a proper kind of system that isolates each of the channels, and you can see that it was a labor of love. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask you, with the new advances in technology and business models, particularly with Apple jumping into the high-res scene, Do you see 5.1s coming back, especially with the immersive, movement? That, again, commercially, it's been one of the challenges. Sony put their weight behind it in the early days with SACD, but do you see it coming back with the streaming technology?
I think when we say 5.1, what we mean is surround music. Okay, I don't necessarily think that whether it's 5.1, 7.1, 7.4.1, whatever that specification is, I don't necessarily think it matters. I think the concept of surround music, I think what I've always said in my lectures to my students is it needs a desire by companies to promote it. But first of all, it needs content. And that means it needs artists to make the content. If no one's going to make something in surround, Apple are not going to push it. Now, obviously, there's a lot of money seemingly being invested right now, as there was back in the day of Super Audio CD and DVD 5.1. There seems to be a lot of money being invested. And I'm fairly hopeful, and I think I said this at the start of the lecture, when you hear a stereo record and you hear the same record in surround, the surround record blows apart the stereo record. And if you take it like for like, the surround version is instantly more accessible. And I think with the technology today, to be able to reduce or recreate that sound in stereo headphones, I think that's the game changer. I don't like to say that often, but I think that's the game changer in terms of what the technology has been looking for over the last, 15 odd years.
Correct.
And I would potentially suggest that one day all records will be made in some form of surround, whether that's binaural, whether that's 7.1, 4.1. That will be the primary way that we digest music. I mean, video games is already a standard, film it's already a standard, stereo versions in both of those mediums are absolutely secondary concerns. No one is mixing a video game in stereo going, this is the primary way we want people to listen to that audio. They're doing it primarily in surround, and the same is for video, for film.
And it just sounds to me like it would be a perfect combination of that and between augmented reality and virtual reality to kind of create completely different experiences, much like what music videos were 25 years ago. And
yeah,
I just don't understand why a label like Mute, as an example, who always led on these things, is not innovating with the library they already have and the great content that exists.
Well, funnily enough, I'm going to be reaching out to Mute about Dolby Atmos very shortly.
Exactly.
And I think one of the big things that people really need to look out for is not only AI, but also 3D television and hologram television. Once those things become mainstream, you're going to need 3D audio for everything. There's no good having a Beyonce video in 3D and having two-dimensional sound. It's not going to work. And when you get to that level of interaction, then it's mainstream. And I think at the moment, people are still treating it like it's a gimmick.
Correct.
And one of the things that I always try to impress when talking about surround is that if you present it properly, 9 times out of 10, you're always going to win the person over with the spatial, the surround, the whatever, that multi-channel format, always. Sorry.
Thanks for your question, matey.
Yeah, thanks, Kia.
Is that okay, Kia?
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. And again, I couldn't agree more. Jaunt is one of the companies that really kind of pushed the whole VR side. They filmed the last Paul McCartney concert in Candlestick in 3D, visually. The experience of what it felt like to be at the front row of McCartney's last Candlestick concert. And they got a lot of good, critical feedback, but I think it's one of those things that is going to take a bunch of the execs to actually start looking forward, as opposed to just taking songs and turning them into ones and
once
zeros.
again, it's the music industry who aren't championing their own product.
Yeah.
What's the company that's championing music? It's a technology company.
Correct.
Apple, right?
Yep.
The Apple are the only people going, look, we've got this great way to sell all of your music again.
Yep.
And record companies going, yeah, but you know what? Do we really? I'm very happy with what I've got. The short-sightedness of record companies are exactly why they don't have control of streaming. They don't have control of the internet. They don't have control of their publishing and everything, because they're you know what? They're dinosaurs. And companies like Mute are the ones that are going to change it. There's lots of independent companies who are going to see there's going to be someone somewhere who's going to go, you know what, let's invest, let's go down this road. You know, and once that person goes down that road, everyone else will follow, and they'll be very successful at it.
Can I ask one follow-up question? On an area that I saw Mute at least move was the notion, so in the DJ circles, there's a big movement around stems, so that basically you can get live mixes. Is that something that you think has around? And for those of you who may not be as familiar, it's basically taking each of the channels and being able to kind of mix it live, if you will. And
I think things like that are very specialist.
Mm-hmm.
They're for DJs. They're for music makers. Mm-hmm. I think originally surround was a specialist thing. Correct. But spatial audio can be done through every single pair of cheap headphones in the world, and therefore that's the opportunity to take it into the mainstream. What needs to happen now, and what we got to hope doesn't happen, is that there's a load of money being thrown at it, right? So, as long as the content is created, the technology company, in this case Apple, will continue pushing the format. If the record companies lose their go back to their short-sighted ways, and don't invest once Apple stop funding it, because essentially I would imagine that that's exactly what's happening. Apple are funding all of this work in the same way that Sony was and DTS was in the times that we were making our products, although that's not what happened with the Depeche Mode stuff. Mute paid for that off its own self. If that happens, then the format will disappear again for another 5 years, you know, until someone gets rid of these dinosaur record executives and gets someone that's in the 21st century.
Yeah.
You know,
shake-up's coming.
Yeah, well, you hope so.
Shake-up's coming, yeah.
Someone's going to do it.
Yeah. Right.
Cheers, Kia. Thank you.
Should we take one more, Rob? Is there one more?
I think we have 2 left in the queue, if that's all right, and then we'll
let's do 2 more. Yeah, great.
Go ahead, Tusa. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, Patty, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
I'm not able to pin Patty. Oh, there you are.
I don't see her.
Yes, I had to. I'm on my phone, and I'm in Louisiana, and it doesn't have the best Wi-Fi in here, so I apologize if you can't really see me or if there's a poor connection.
We see you now. We see you. We're good.
Yeah. Okay,
Hi,
great.
Patty.
Hi, Larry. How are you?
Good. Splendid.
Hi, Kevin. It's such an honor to speak to you. I really want to thank you for this chat because I am a music aficionado, but I'm not like technically geared, I suppose. And this is a direct question to that. And that is, I know I saw the whole Best Buy commercial earlier, but I want to have a system where I can have the 5.1, like all of it. I want to have the whole collection, just like Rob had stated earlier. But I want it to be like, I don't know if you remember TDK. They had a commercial with a guy sitting on the chair and he's like in front of the television and all of his hair is blowing back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember that.
What kind of system do you recommend that I would get, or someone like myself would get, that's not an engineer, so to speak, but
don't need to invest a lot of money in a surround system. I think who's the guy who get the English accent? Is it Mark?
Mark.
Yeah.
Mark, yeah. Honestly, you can pick up a decent surround system for a few $100s if you're in America, or pounds if you're in England. You really, really don't need to spend a lot of money. The main thing that you need to do when you're buying a surround system is two things. Get yourself the 5 speakers or the 6 speakers, first of all, but you need to have an amplifier. You need to have an amplifier that has discrete selection, speaker selection on it. Okay, don't get one that just has what they call something like upscaling or it's something along those lines where basically it's not true 5.1, so you don't get the exact experience that I would have in the studio replicated in your house. If you go down to your local Best Buy or whatever, or I probably wouldn't even go to Best Buy. I'd go to like a decent hi-fi store where they sell televisions, and go into the cinemas that they have and say, I want a 5.1 speaker setup and I want a 5.1 amplifier. They're probably trying to sell you a sound bar. Say, I don't want a sound bar, I want the speakers, and then go from there.
What about like a headset?
Well, the headset thing is for something slightly different. That's going to be for the spatial audio stuff that's been released on iTunes and Apple Music. And really for that, there's no Depeche Mode content. Actually, there might be Depeche Mode. I haven't looked actually, but I don't think there is. And if there is, it's not truly mixed in 7.4.1, whatever they call it. So for that at the moment, you're going to get to hear lots of other music, but you probably won't get to hear Depeche Mode in that format.
Just as a follow-up question, I thank you very much for that. Very informative. And I like my toys to run smoothly. So I'm going to get something like that on my next tax break. But anyways, my follow-up question is, do you have any fanboy, fangirl alert geek story that you could share with us about Alan Wilder and if you've worked with him?
Oh, the woman just love Alan.
What's the thing about?
Just love Alan.
What's the thing
He
about
was a master
Alan?
with the reverb.
The reverb, yeah.
Alan Wilder is reverb.
I think any man that stands next to Alan naturally looks like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. I mean, he was an incredibly handsome man.
Okay,
the woman just loves him.
Is that it?
That's it. Yeah, they love him.
Yeah. My experience of working with Alan, and I haven't worked with Alan loads. I genuinely haven't worked with him loads, but I've met him a few times, and I've been lucky enough to been down to his studio, where he lives a couple of times. He's an incredibly serious man about his music. He really wants to explore sound, and he really wants to do something completely different. And whenever I've had the pleasure of being around him, that's what he talks about most when he's either listening to other people's music or trying to make his own. It's that he's always trying to do something that nobody else is doing. And if you listen to what he did when he was with the Mode, he completely changed the way the band actually used sound for instruments. And I'll give you an example. Possibly Alan brought a lot of the ideas where instead of using conventional drum sounds like hi-hats or snares, that they would be using, obviously they did lots of stuff with the earlier albums, but they would be using things like bass lines to create the rhythm of drums. And if you listen to Violator, there's loads of examples on that. And for me, he just had the ability to just go one stage further. And no one can doubt his contribution to Depeche Mode, I don't think.
Absolutely.
Oh, no. Well, thank you so much. And Vaughn, of course, best of luck with your singles.
Bless you, Patty. Lots of love. Thank you so much, Donnie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patty.
Thank you. Thank you again.
See you again, Patty.
Bye.
Bless you.
Atusa, who was the final question?
We've got the leader, and I don't know if we can fit Christian in, because I know you guys are dying to have your pizza.
I'll worry about that. If there's two more, let's get two more.
All right. Dalida, are you here?
You might be down to one.
Yeah, maybe.
Where are you, Delita?
Last chance, Delita.
Let me move to.
Let's go to the. Is that Christian?
Yes.
Let's go to Christian. We see if the leader's still there when we finish with Christian.
You might have answered the question earlier, but was there plans for doing the erasure collection?
Not that I know of. We did the Yazoo.
Yeah.
We
I
did
really
the
would like to hear the erasure collection, at least through chorus, through the self-titled Erasure album. Those three albums would just sound amazing.
Yeah, they would. I mean, once again, Vince Clarke, smashing it out of the park.
Christian, I always said that chorus is like Erasure's Songs of Faith and Devotion. Oh, sorry, it's their Violator. It's like chorus is their ultimate album, mixed by Dave Bascombe. I think that was. Yeah. Great
chorus.
What a record.
Great.
That one, I say, and the self-titled Erasure album, they have to be in surround sound.
I say is on a different level. It is outstanding track album. Yeah.
I just love to hear those analog sounds just going around my head or something,
Well, I think the next thing is to try and get mute on this spatial audio thing.
I think so.
I think that'd be quite interesting.
I think
I can reach out to those guys.
I think we can. We've got the man here. Who can do, you're our ambassador, Kevin. He's our man. If he can't do it, no one can. I will leave you with that.
Much.
I like the Bauhaus shirt.
Oh yeah, this is from the Palladium, the final 3 shows.
Oh yeah. I went to that December of 2019.
I think I did.
And you got thrown out of it.
The December 1st, I think is what it was. This one.
Oh, nice.
The last one they added, yeah.
No, Larry, I got kicked out of Peter Murphy in 1988 at the Palladium. That was a bit before that, but. It looks like Delita's back. Thanks, Christian, for the question. And this will be our final question. Delita.
Delita. Come on. There she is.
There you go.
Next time.
Next time. You sure? Well, thank you anyway.
Well, thanks, Delita.
Thanks, Delita.
All right, so everybody, you're welcome to unmute. And if you could give a round of applause to Kevin and Vaughn George for.
Thank you.
Didn't do anything, but thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob.
Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. We really enjoyed it as well.
Tomorrow.
I'm gonna contact you guys because I want to get your shirt information so I can send you the Reverb Equals Girls shirts.
Oh, come on. That's my idea.
Yeah.
I'm making it for you.
She's not selling them. She's
I'm
sending you.
not selling them. I'm just making it for you because it's really.
Can you hear me?
So much, guys.
All right, cheers. Thank you very much, Kevin, and thanks, Vaughn George, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Take care.
Love you all. Adios.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Take care.